let's start getting to the nuts and bolts of this thing. Packer needs, as you mentioned off the top, Jason, for a team that got to the NFC Championship game, there are holes everywhere. They need a guard without Lang. They need a running back with Ty Montgomery, Kristen Michael, and Don Jackson. I think they had 177 carries amongst them, and I think Montgomery was 113 last year. An edge rusher, another corner. Where do we start, Michael?
I think fans want to start in the secondary.
Yeah.
You look at what happened in Atlanta and just down the stretch, like we already talked about. Cornerback, you would think, is a big need. You've got Demarius Randall, you've got Quentin Rollins, the first and second round pick that you've invested in those two guys. But it's just such an area where there's no speed really at that position. The fastest guy is Demarius Randall, and at 4.45, I think, or 4.48, there's a lot of receivers in the league now that can run faster than that. And we saw at times that speed was an issue. Quentin Rollins was in the high 4.5s. Micah Hyde was in the high 4.5s. They just don't have a lot of guys there. And so I think they probably do view it as a need despite having enough bodies to fill the position. And I got to think they're going to look for somebody that's either a big physical corner or somebody that has speed that they don't currently have.
Jason, what do you think?
Well, I think that they have a remarkable number of needs on the defensive side of the ball, and it's remarkable to me that we seem to have the same conversation. I mean, it's
5
great to have
years?
Michael here,
Yeah.
but Michael hasn't been through 5 drafts, and it's the same thing every year. It's a defensive player at the top of it. They haven't taken an offensive player since 2011 when they took Derek Sherrod with their first-round pick. I mean, it's defense, 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 and yet what are we always talking about when we talk about the shortcomings of this team? Defense, defense, defense. They have to get it right. Ted Thompson can get up there and tell us he took the best player available after every pick like he loves to do. But I think back to a draft like 2012, they went defense on their first 5 picks, and 2 times they traded up to go get defensive players. They can't afford to be wrong. They can't have the Jarrell Worthy picks. They can't have the Kyrie Thornton picks. This team, Jerron McMillan's a perfect example. A safety position that continued to be an issue until they finally got it right with HaHa Clinton-Dix. They have to improve defensively. This team won a Super Bowl not only because Aaron Rodgers was terrific, but it was because their defense was in the top 5, both in scoring defense and yards allowed. They haven't put a defense like that out there since, despite all their investments.
See, what do you think?
Yeah, defensive back edge rusher. I think that's the 2 biggest needs. You would hope that is where they focus early in the draft and often in the draft. And I don't know if you are going to get that guy that changes a franchise defensively, but you hope to find someone, at least pass rush-wise, that can be an impact guy in key moments of games. Maybe not every single play, but a guy who has a nose for making that big play.
Impact.
It's
players. A word I heard from a couple of their scouts tail end of last season, even though they were on that winning streak. And another Packer scout told me, speed. We've got to get faster. Davis last year, the wide receiver, a burner. Okay, I have no idea how he's going to function here from here on out, but it's a field-stretching player, and it's a lot of speed on that Packer offense. So they've got to do the same on that defensive side of the ball as well. Can you just plug and play a guard? They survived Sitton's departure. Can they survive Lang's departure by just plugging in the next Lane Taylor on the right side?
I haven't been here long enough to see how a lot of the plug-and-plays have played out over the years, but my first experience was the Lane Taylor situation. And because he played so much better than at least the media expected, I wonder if that at all created any sort of a dangerous precedent where they're going to trust their undrafted guys, their 5th, 6th, 7th round guys, maybe even more so than is reasonable, simply because Lane Taylor was put into a really adverse situation and probably exceeded expectations.
I think that's a great point by Michael. I think we're going to find out whether they believe that or not based on what they do in terms of offensive line selections, because they also have a history of David Bakhtiari. It wasn't the plan, but he comes in as a 4th-round pick and starts as a rookie. They've got Corey Linsley. Right, exactly. And so they've got, and I understand Brian Bulaga was a first-round pick, but again, Tauscher suffers his injury, and Bulaga has to start a lot of games as a rookie. So they've seen rookies do it. I remember in 2006 when they started 3 different rookies, Tony Mall, Jason Spitz, Darren College. Yeah. Each of those 3 guys started 10 games apiece. The problem is their offensive line was in a really good place. And I understand that maybe I'm a little biased on the TJ Lang thing, but I think you can afford, and I thought Bob McGinn's column on this was spot on. I think you can afford to lose 1 Pro Bowl guard I'm really eager to see if you can afford to lose 2.
But you've got the interior of what was considered one of the best interior
And the way your
offensive
quarterback
lines.
plays, he
Yeah.
needs that solidified in front of him to allow him to do everything he does.
And the need for a running game. I love Ty Montgomery, what he's able to do and all that sort of thing, but I still think he is kind of a niche player, great in formations, making defenses guess where he's going to be the receiver or whatever. They still need some sort of a hammer, Z, don't they?
Yeah, I think a 3-down back would be a nice luxury to have. But I think with Michael and with Montgomery, I think you're starting to see the trend in a lot of backfields, guys that are multi-purpose, that can now get outside and create those matchups with linebackers, safeties, where speed is an issue. You see it with Atlanta, you see it with New England, you see it with other franchises. I don't know that you necessarily have to overreach for a 3rd-down back, but I think you try to find one of those.
So Aaron Rukowski's going to be the 3rd-and-1 guy? You just bang
Just
in there?
a monster?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Well, the 2 biggest personnel decisions from last year that I wanted to see how they played out this year in terms of the way the organization was thinking was guard, as we talked about, and then running back to me is the other one, because they found a way to go away from what Mike McCarthy had done in the past with running the ball with Eddie Lacy, with professing that he was a run-first guy. And they found a way to succeed by basically putting a ton of it on Aaron Rodgers and finding ways to implement the running game that were abstract, non-traditional. And so if they don't address running back in a very obvious way, to me that is a sign that McCarthy, when he was forced to adapt and forced to change last year, actually found something that he thinks will be productive going forward. And so you couple that with guard, and I think you can find 2 really easy areas to see how the coaching staff viewed last season.
I'm not a hot take guy, but
But here comes a hot
here's
take.
is piping hot. Yeah, so I'll deliver it
Steaming.
at Eddie Lacy's rummage sale in a couple weeks.
Is it LaTroy Guion at guard?
Yeah.
like we saw at the end of Atlanta?
Yeah,
Now that's hot.
Now that was something. I really believe that Eddie Lacy was the perfect fit for this offense. I thought he was the perfect complement, his running style to Aaron Rodgers' ability, and I think it was a mistake to have him depart. Now, I understand maybe their offer was inferior, but I also think that, from what I understand, part of Eddie Lacy wasn't just about wanting to go to a run-first offense. It was about getting a fresh start after his coach basically called him fat at the end of the 2015 season for everybody to hear. So I have always liked Eddie Lacy. I understand that he's maybe a little goofy sometimes with his cartoons and not the most mature kid. I understand people like to make fat jokes about him. But the guy ran with a style that reminded me of what Amon Green did for this offense back in the mid-2000s.
Even to a lesser degree, Ryan Grant. You know, when McCarthy first got here, he was a one-cut, hard-nosed guy that really made this offense balanced and more effective.
Well, and before Lacy went down, again, he was averaging 5 yards a carry. I mean, he gets yards.
I think people sometimes underestimated just how talented he was for a guy his size.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watched, we see them every day in OTAs, we see him every day in practice. To watch some of the footwork things that he could do and then watch some of the other backs, even guys that were much smaller than him, he is an unbelievably nimble, unbelievably athletic guy, and he just happens to be a guy that maintained those traits despite the fact that he was a heavier player throughout his career. Ultimately, it got the best of him in Green Bay, but his talent, I think, is unquestionable when it comes to physical ability.
And he had that energy that I think everyone fed off of.
Yeah, I agree.
When he would have a big run, everyone was
again,
pumped.
I think, as you pointed out, Michael, McCarthy really loved the metamorphosis this offense underwent towards the tail end of last season. Get it on the edge, spread it around, and put the ball in the best player on this
It's a lot different when
franchise.
people know that that's what you do.
I understand. All right.